Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. We're here to talk about cycles of success, supporting women's wellbeing at work. I'm Tahani Saridar, I'm the CEO of Think Through Nutrition, and we are a charity that's dedicated to improving brain health and wellbeing through the power of nutrition. We're here today to talk about women's health, which is an issue that's often overlooked in the workplace, but it has a really significant and direct effect on productivity, on retention, and on business performance. We know that 150 million working days are lost every single year due to poor women's health, but a lot of workplaces lack the right strategies to support their employees effectively. And so that's what we'd like to change, starting with today. The session today is about practical and evidence-based solutions. We're going to explore how nutrition plays a critical role in supporting hormonal health, energy, and cognitive function, and also what you guys can do to take action. Joining me today, we have Melanie Wilkinson, who's a registered nutritionist and our very own scientific research manager. Melanie is a specialist in brain health and women's health, and she runs her own practice alongside working with Think Through Nutrition. She's going to talk us through the latest science and simple practical strategies that can make a real difference to women in the workplace. So we'll try and keep things as concise as possible. We've got an hour to speak with you today, and we'll be as action-driven as we can. If you've got any questions as we go through the session, please just drop them in the Q&A tab. And please note there's both a Q&A and a chat tab. So pose questions in Q&A. And if you want to use a chat function, you can talk directly to our team and make any comments to them there and then have a wider conversation. But just so you know, we're going to prioritize questions at the end from Q&A. And our colleague, Alexander Crickmay, is going to join us later to kind of help share these questions. So on that note, let's get started. And I generally like to start with paraphrasing our wonderful patron, Prue Leith, who says, by helping people to understand how small, simple changes to their diet can drastically improve brain health, we can enable both individuals and organizations to take control of their well-being and make smarter choices for a healthy future. And really, that's what we're trying to do today, translating knowledge into action. And we want to help you take those practical steps to support women's health in a way that improves well-being and also drives better business outcomes. And you might wonder why we're qualified to do this. Well, Think Through Nutrition has been at the forefront of nutrition and brain health for 40 years. We celebrated our milestone birthday last autumn, and from the very beginning, our mission has been to establish a strong and scientific foundation for the link between nutrition, brain health, and behavior. And over the last 40 years, we've conducted a lot of research around this, looking at clinical trials, large-scale research projects, and also practical interventions that span a lot of different sectors, from prisons to schools to healthcare and corporate environments. And this work and this research has given us some really deep insights into nutrition's impact, especially in high pressure settings where clear thinking and cognitive resilience matter most. And I know those are environments that you'll all be familiar with today. But over that time, our mission has remained the same: to empower individuals and organizations to optimize brain health and unlock the full potentials of individuals through better nutrition. So, on that note, let's focus on the bigger picture, why women's health is a business issue. To talk us through that, I'm going to hand over to Mel, who will discuss the reality of women's health in the workplace. Thank you, Mel.
Thank you. I am so happy to be speaking today in honour of International Women's Day. So when it comes to work, we talk a lot about productivity, about efficiency, about retaining talent in the workplace. But here's something we don't talk about enough: women's health and how much it's costing us. So according to recent reports, and as Tahani mentioned, 150 million working days are lost each year due to poor women's health. That's time lost to sick leave, lower productivity, and employees struggling through symptoms without the right support. And it's not just about the physical symptoms, it's also about the culture around women's health at work. So many women don't feel heard or taken seriously. Nearly half have heard derogatory comments about their health at work, and 84% say their concerns were dismissed by medical professionals. These issues span across life stages. 70% of women struggle with their periods, 64% experience challenges with menopause, 62% face health difficulties during pregnancy. And it goes beyond reproductive health. Women are twice as likely as men to develop Alzheimer's, a condition we now know to be heavily influenced by nutrition, lifestyle, and hormonal changes. We tell women to lean in, to push for equality, and to break the glass ceiling. But how can they do that if the system isn't even acknowledging the unique challenges that they face? This is exactly why conversations like this matter. Over the course of this presentation, we're going to look at how women's health affects performance, energy, resilience, and long-term well-being, and what we can actually do about it. Because the reality is, there are solutions. Things can be done at both an individual and workplace level to better support women, to reduce the stigma, and to create environments where women aren't just getting by. So let's start here. If we really want to improve women's health at work, at home, and throughout life, the first thing we need to acknowledge is this: women are not just small men. For too long, health research, nutrition guidelines, and workplace wellness programs have treated the male body as the default, overlooking the distinct physiology of women. This long-standing bias in medical research has led to gaps in diagnosis, mismanagement of conditions, and a lack of tailored health strategies. But women's biology is different, and ignoring these comes at a cost. So why are we different? So first, there's hormonal complexity. Women navigate a dynamic network of hormones that influence metabolism, mood, cognition, and cardiovascular function, fluctuating constantly across life stages. And what a woman needs in her 20s is not the same as in her 40s or her 60s. Metabolism also differs significantly. So hormonal shifts will impact everything from blood glucose control to how the body processes and stores fat. Yet most mainstream nutrition advice does not account for this. And then you have heart health. So heart disease is the leading cause of death in women, yet most research is focused on men. And this is a real problem because women's symptoms often present differently, so it can lead to misdiagnosis and delayed treatment. And then there's brain health. So I've already said women are at higher risk of Alzheimer's and cognitive decline, yet workplace health initiatives fail to address this and support kind of long-term brain function. Now, I know all of this might sound a little bit overwhelming and a bit doom and gloom, but it really doesn't have to be, and this is the purpose of the presentation. The reality is, these risks aren't inevitable. Nutrition and lifestyle are powerful tools that can prevent, slow, or even reverse many of these challenges. And we'll explore that in this presentation, looking at small evidence-based changes that have a profound impact, not just on day-to-day well-being, but on lifelong health and resilience. And I just thought that's so, so empowering. So this moves us nicely onto the next section, understanding the underlying biology, how hormones shape health, performance, and resilience. So now we've established that women are not just small men, and the biggest difference is probably our hormones. But hormones are really important. They are chemical messengers that regulate metabolism, energy, mood, brain function, and reproduction. While men's hormones, primarily testosterone, follow a relatively stable cycle, women's hormones are in constant flux, not just across the menstrual cycle, but throughout life stages like pregnancy, perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause. And these fluctuations shape how women think, feel, and perform, influencing our stress response, our cognitive function, metabolism, energy, and so on. Yet when women experience symptoms like fatigue, brain fog, mood shifts, they're often dismissed with, "Is it your hormones?" As if that makes the experience any less real or any less important. But hormones aren't the problem. Hormones aren't a weakness or an excuse. They are absolutely a fundamental part of female physiology. And understanding them isn't about undermining women, it's about unlocking better health, performance, and long-term resilience. So how do the hormonal shifts actually play out? So the menstrual cycle isn't just about reproduction, it also influences mood and performance, our energy, and some would now even consider it a vital sign of overall health. So while a typical cycle is often described as 28 days, a healthy cycle can still range from anything to 20 to kind of 35 days, and it does vary due to factors like age, stress, and health conditions. So throughout the cycle, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, FSH, LH rise and fall at different points. And I won't go into all the details, but the key thing to understand is how these fluctuations influence how we feel and function. So the cycle is typically divided into two main phases. So we have the follicular phase, which is the first half, and then the luteal phase, which is our second half. For clarity, I'm going to break it down a little bit into 4 more kind of subparts. So menstruation. So this typically occurs from day 1 to 5. So day 1 of our cycle is the first day of our period. And at this point, estrogen and progesterone are at their lowest, triggering the shedding of the uterine lining. In this stage, we may feel fatigue, increased pain sensitivity, lower mood, lower energy. Now, as we move through, so the follicular phase, and then we're going to kind of day 6 to 14 here, estrogen begins to rise, energy, mood, and cognitive function tend to improve. Many women will feel their sharpest, most focused, and physically strong during this time. This makes it a great time for things like problem solving, high performance tasks, presentations, and so on. Then kind of marking the middle of your cycle is ovulation, typically around day 14. And this is when estrogen and progesterone have peaked. You may feel a boost in confidence, a boost in motivation, sociability. And this phase often brings higher resilience and mental clarity, good for networking, leadership kind of opportunities, those types of things. And then you enter the second part of your cycle, and this is your luteal phase. So after ovulation, progesterone becomes the dominant hormone. And initially, this may support sleep, stress resilience, and metabolism. But as we move through the kind of luteal phase later on, estrogen and progesterone begin to drop. And this is when we experience kind of low energy, irritability, disrupted sleep. And then if pregnancy doesn't happen, the whole cycle occurs again. But why does it matter? So it matters, as I've said, because these hormonal shifts influence energy, focus, mood, well-being. Yet workplaces often expect women to perform the same kind of every day without recognizing these natural fluctuations. So just by understanding these shifts, we can work with them, not against them, helping women feel their best, stay productive, and try and thrive at every stage of our cycle. So in the previous slides, we discussed hormonal fluctuations that most women will experience, but for some women, there are challenges that go beyond typical cycle-related changes. And I'm just going to highlight some of the most common. So PCOS, so polycystic ovary syndrome, this affects 1 in 10 women and is characterized by insulin resistance, fatigue, irregular cycles, and a higher risk of metabolic conditions. It can make things like weight management, energy regulation, and even mental health more challenging. All of obviously will impact workplace productivity and well-being. Then we have endometriosis. It's another highly debilitating condition. It can often take years to diagnose. I think it's about 8 years now is the average. It causes chronic pain, inflammation, and fatigue, contributing to absenteeism and difficulty concentrating. And also the associated inflammation with this can impact gut health, immune health, and brain clarity. There's also PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, is a severe kind of disabling form of PMS. So extreme mood swings, kind of depression, anxiety may fluctuate, cognitive difficulties. Then you have fibroids and heavy bleeding. These don't just cause discomfort. They can lead to things such as iron deficiency, which is then leads to low energy cognitive function. And many women either work through these symptoms or take frequent absences, both again, which can impact workplace performance. And while I won't be going into detail today on these kind of conditions, there are very tailored nutritional strategies that can support many of these conditions, but they would require a more personalized approach. But for us, the most important thing is the awareness of these conditions, because they are extremely mentally and physically debilitating and remain undiagnosed largely. So despite their clear impact on performance, mental clarity, and long-term health, it's something for all of us to be aware of. We've talked a lot about hormones, the menstrual cycle, and the conditions that impact women's health. But one of the biggest hormonal transition in a woman's life is the menopause. Right now, 13 million women in the UK are perimenopausal or menopausal, making up a third of the female population, and nearly 8 in 10 are in the workforce. Women of menopausal age are the fastest growing workforce demographic. Yet despite this, many workplaces do not have menopause policies, support structures, or flexible working arrangements to accommodate these challenges that come with this life stage. On average, women will spend 40% of their lives in menopause. So this is not a short phase. It's a significant period of time that affects long-term health, cognitive function, and well-being. And the lack of consideration in the workplace has a large economic impact. So 1 in 10 women aged 40 to 55 leave their jobs due to menopause symptoms. More than half of working women have missed work due to menopause-related challenges. And in total, this costs businesses and the economy 1.5 billion annually in lost talent and productivity. Despite how much menopause is now talked about, there is actually still confusion about what it is. And rightly so. Menopause is actually just a snapshot in time. It's a singular day. It's the 1-year anniversary of your final menstrual period, since your final menstrual period. Only after that point are you considered postmenopausal. And in fact, if you then have another period after that kind of year, you go back into being kind of perimenopausal. But menopause doesn't happen overnight. It's a transition that spans years. For most, like I've mentioned, this happens during perimenopause, which is the phase leading up to menopause, which can actually last 4 to 10 years. And this is when hormonal shifts are the most dramatic, bringing noticeable symptoms. However, I do want to say menopause can also happen earlier due to surgery, chemotherapy, or certain health conditions. So the fluctuating hormones that happen in perimenopause. So estrogen, this can impact brain function, sleep, mood, energy, and therefore lead to brain fog, disrupted sleep, anxiety, and fatigue. Since estrogen is protective of brains, bones, hearts, and metabolism, its decline increases risk in these areas, making this a critical time to focus on our health and well-being. It's also important to acknowledge that estrogen isn't the only hormone that fluctuates. So progesterone will decline too, which can disrupt sleep, increase stress sensitivity. Testosterone drops, which may reduce motivation, concentration, physical strength. And in total, these shifts can affect confidence, decision-making, and a lot of people don't even realize that they're going through perimenopause. Without awareness, symptoms are often mistreated or overlooked, meaning many women struggle unnecessarily before getting the support they need. So recognizing and addressing these changes earlier can make a significant difference in both health and the quality of life. When we talk about menopause, it's important to recognize that every woman's experience is different. Some won't experience symptoms at all, but there are over 50 reported symptoms, likely even more. While most people associate menopause with hot flushes and night sweats, research actually suggests these aren't the most commonly reported. Instead, symptoms like brain fog, poor sleep, anxiety, and memory loss are far more prevalent. And obviously, these have a direct impact on focus, productivity, and career progression. Yet menopause, as I said, remains widely misunderstood in the workplace. And if businesses fail to address this reality, they risk losing experienced, highly skilled professionals at a time when many women are at the peak of their career. So to change this, workplaces must foster a culture where women feel able to speak up and access the help that they need. When we talk about menopause, and I see this a lot, the conversation often centers on weight gain. And while weight changes are very, very real, what's driving them is the shift in energy regulation and metabolism. So to start, estrogen plays a key role in regulating energy, blood sugar, and fat storage. When levels of estrogen declines, the body adapts in a way that many women find frustrating and difficult to manage. And one of the biggest changes is a reduction in insulin sensitivity, basically making it harder for cells to effectively process the glucose that we're getting from things like carbs for energy. And this can lead to a lot of blood sugar fluctuations throughout the day. So this can be characterized by energy crashes, fatigue, difficulty maintaining focus, especially in the afternoon. And these shifts make craving stronger and can contribute to changes in our appetite regulation. Another key shift that happens is with cholesterol metabolism. So estrogen does help keep LDL, which is typically known as our bad cholesterol, low, and HDL, which is our good cholesterol, higher. After menopause, the balance shifts unfavorably with LDL rising and increasing cardiovascular risk, And this often happens even when lifestyle habits remain the same, which can be alarming if, you get a blood test and things like that for certain individuals. At the same time, fat distribution changes. So instead of being stored around the hips and the thighs, more fat accumulates around the abdomen, which is more metabolically active and linked to a higher risk of cardiovascular disease. At the same time, muscle loss also accelerates, metabolism slows, and it becomes harder to maintain strength and body composition, even with consistent exercise. Now, again, this sounds doom and gloom, but what I want to say is these changes aren't a personal failing. They are a biological reality. Many women experience these shifts and assume they're doing something wrong. They're not. They are physiological changes, but that doesn't mean that we can't do anything about it. The more we understand these metabolic shifts, the better we can do to support women in maintaining energy, focus, and long-term health, both individually and in the workplace. One of the most undiscussed aspects of menopause, yet arguably the most important, is its impact on the brain. We have covered this a bit, but I cannot emphasize enough, estrogen is not just a reproductive hormone, it is a key neuroprotective hormone. It plays a role in cognitive function, memory, and brain metabolism. So when estrogen levels start to decline, we see shifts in brain energy production, neurotransmitter balance, and even structural brain changes. And this is why we experience symptoms such as brain fog, memory lapses, and difficulty concentrating. But beyond these short-term symptoms, the longer-term implications for brain aging and things like neurodegenerative disease risk are significant. And this really highlights my point. So as said, women make up 2/3 of Alzheimer's patients. And while longer lifespan is a factor, brain imaging research, and this is a fairly new area of research, suggests that estrogen decline accelerates brain aging. So on this slide, what you can see is two images of PET scans. The scan at the top shows a healthy premenopausal brain with high metabolic activity, while the scan on the bottom is of a postmenopausal woman, which shows over 30% less brain activity. Now, before I go on, I do want to caveat this by saying that not all women will experience these changes in the same way, and we do know genetics, lifestyle, and overall health also play a role in this. However, what is becoming clear is that menopause marks a period of increased vulnerability to brain metabolism in a lot of women. So as estrogen declines, the brain basically becomes less efficient at using glucose for energy, which can contribute to cognitive decline, increased forgetfulness, mental fatigue. But there's also structural changes that we're beginning to see, which occurs in key regions such as those responsible for memory, learning, problem solving, making it harder to retain new information and process complex decisions under pressure. In a professional setting, this really matters. And without the awareness and support, many women are left navigating these changes alone, often questioning their own abilities rather than recognizing the physiological shifts that are happening. So we've talked a lot about the science of women's health and the challenges we face, and now we're going to look at some of the solutions. And of course, one of the most impactful factors is nutrition. So just to put it really, really simply, we are built from the food that we eat. Every cell in our body, including our brain cells, is formed, maintained, and fueled by the nutrients that we consume. And for women, this is probably even more significant. Hormonal fluctuations across the menstrual cycle, pregnancy, and menopause directly impact energy, mood, and cognitive function, making nutrition a crucial factor in supporting performance, focus, overall well-being. Despite making just 2% of our body weight, the brain consumes around 20% of our total energy, which is more than any other organ. This means that what we clearly has a profound impact on brain function. But the brain isn't the only organ that's influenced by nutrition. The gut plays a major role, especially for women, and there's been a big kind of glow up in recent times of the gut microbiome, and for good reason. So the gut microbiome isn't just involved in digestion, it directly affects metabolism, energy, focus, hormonal regulation, a whole host of things. But I want to talk about something called the estrobolome, which is a collection of gut bacteria that helps to regulate our estrogen levels. When gut health is balanced, estrogen is processed and eliminated properly. But when it's disrupted by stress, diet, antibiotics, it can throw hormones out of balance, impacting PMS, menstrual cycles, menopause transition, PCOS, and even we're looking at symptoms, conditions like endometriosis. So how do we support gut health? This is a whole topic in itself. So I'm just going to provide a little bit of high level insight. Eat more fiber. So vegetables, legumes, whole grains, nuts, seeds. This feeds what we would say the beneficial bacteria. As it stands, only 9% of adults meet the 30-gram daily target. So this is a really key focus. I do also just want to say, if you are a lot lower and decide to increase fiber, do so gradually and with a lot of hydration. Yeah. And then the next is probiotics. So these are things like live yogurt, kimchi, sauerkraut, kombucha. They basically introduce some good bacteria into your gut. I'd also prioritize variety, so make different food choices, switch up your vegetables, switch up your fruits, switch up your yogurts. The more diverse your diet, the healthier your microbiome. And then things like limiting sugar, ultra-processed foods, as they can disrupt the balance of bacteria in your gut. Essentially, a healthy gut means more stable hormones, better energy, sharper focus, all which is really key for women's health. Now, so managing the menstrual cycle. So there is research on cycle-specific nutrition, but it is very much still emerging, which is exciting. But that I'm going to just cover kind of the more established research today. So menstruation. So women could experience fatigue, poor concentration, and iron loss due to just bleeding may be a major factor. And actually up to 12% of premenopausal women have iron deficiency anemia, with the main symptom being extreme fatigue. So focus here would be on iron-rich foods, so leafy greens, lentils, poultry, lower amounts of red meat. This can help replenish stores, but also vitamin C, which is particularly important for plant-based individuals because it helps boost the absorption of iron. So this is found in things like bell peppers, citrus fruits, broccoli, and so on. Then the luteal phase and kind of our premenstrual phase, so PMS. So as progesterone rises, mood swings, bloating, and cravings can kick in. And there is some research showing magnesium, which can be found in dark chocolate, nuts, seeds, spinach, helps with fluid retention and mood regulation. There's also some research on calcium and vitamin D to support muscle function and hormone balance, and omega-3s can kind of aid emotional stability, mood. In fact, the luteal phase has also been said to increase our calorie needs increase slightly. Meanwhile, insulin sensitivity drops, which does make our cravings stronger. This is often why people want kind of chocolate in this phase. What you want to do is try and get ahead of that. So promote things like complex carbs, which is found in quinoa, whole grains, oats, legumes, to help stabilize blood sugar. And then actually pairing them with protein and healthy fats. So nuts, seeds, avocado, chicken, poultry, lentils, to help keep energy steady and support hormonal regulation. But ultimately, everyone's cycle is different, so symptoms and nutritional needs will vary. And while nutrition isn't a cure-all, it can play a role in supporting energy, focus, and resilience within the workplace. Okay, so by now we know perimenopause is a transition phase marked by fluctuating hormones. But what isn't actually kind of what we overlook is how nutrition can help shape this and help shape menopausal outcomes later on. Instead of just managing symptoms, midlife is an opportunity to optimize long-term health. And we know from research that things like balancing blood sugar, reducing inflammation, and supporting metabolic health can help to reduce things like the brain fog, the cognitive decline, the fatigue, and the hot flushes that we see in menopause. So you can glance at the slide for specific nutrients, but some key players include the protein for muscle maintenance and metabolism, omega-3s to reduce neuroinflammation and support mood, magnesium for stress regulation and sleep, calcium and vitamin D for bone health, and fiber for gut health, blood sugar control, hormonal health. But here's the bigger picture. Nutrition really does not happen in isolation. We don't eat in a vacuum. Our environment dictates so many of our choices. So when we're stressed or low on willpower, we default to what's easy, whether that's office snacks, cafe options, or convenience foods. And that's why creating an environment that makes healthy choices easier is just as important as knowing what to eat. So in workplaces where habits are shaped daily, this will and can make a real difference. Okay, so this slide shows MRI scans comparing brain health in women following a Mediterranean diet versus a Westernized diet, and it reveals quite considerable differences. So the Mediterranean diet is associated with better preserved brain structures, including a stronger hippocampus, which is essential for memory, and smaller ventricles, which suggest less brain atrophy, which is basically the shrinking of the brain. And then there's the Western diet, which is characterized by high intake of ultra-processed food, refined carbohydrates, added sugars, unhealthy fats, and processed meats, while also being low in fiber, antioxidants, and other nutrients. This is linked to brain shrinkage, larger ventricles, and fluid-filled spaces, all markers of that we see in kind of cognitive decline, and then as we go on to looking at dementia risk. So this really highlights how nutrition is not just about preventing weight gain, it directly influences brain health. And just to go on to the Mediterranean diet, I don't endorse diets, but if you're looking for a model to emulate, this is one of the most well-researched approaches to long-term health. It's not a trend, but a traditional way of eating that focuses on fresh, minimally processed, locally sourced foods, and importantly, the enjoyment of food. So take a look at the slide, but in kind of simple terms, plant foods form the foundation: vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes. Olive oil is the primary fat source. Protein comes from fish, poultry, and plant-based sources, with red meat eaten sparingly. Dairy is also included in moderation, with fermented options like yogurt and cheeses that offer different benefits. Fruit for natural sweetness. And traditionally, it does include wine, but for menopausal women, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. But for women in midlife, this way of eating has been linked to improvements in inflammation, better cardiovascular health, and improved metabolic and brain resilience. If you don't want to follow the Mediterranean diet, that's also fine. But what matters most is you're getting key nutrients in that support kind of brain function and metabolic balance. You can see from the slide some key nutrients to focus on, but I want to highlight one in particular, which is omega-3s. So the brain is nearly 60% fat, and two key omega-3s, so DHA and EPA, play critical roles. So DHA is our structural component of brain cells, which is essential for neuronal integrity, cognitive function, and mental clarity. And higher DHA intake is associated with better memory, reduced brain fog, lower risk of cognitive decline, which is particularly important, as we've shown, in perimenopause and menopause. Then you have EPA, which is more active in regulating inflammation, which is key for mood stability, hormonal balance, and menstrual health. And it can help, or I also want to say it can help manage PMS symptoms. The best sources of omega-3 come from oily fish. So we use the acronym SMASH, which is sardines, mackerel, anchovies, salmon, and herring. But you can also get it from some plant-based sources: flaxseed, walnuts, algae-based sources. So in all, food holds a lot of power. And what I hope this presentation has also highlighted, that it's not about restriction, it's about giving different nutrients to your body and what it needs to thrive kind of through each life stage. So we've covered a lot today: how hormones shape energy, cognition, and resilience, how midlife transitions impact focus and performance, and how the right nutrition can be a game changer. But the truth is, women's health doesn't exist in isolation. It plays out in boardrooms, meetings, and day-to-day performance. And nutrition is one of the most powerful but overlooked tools that we can use to support this. The right approach to food can mean the difference between burnout and resilience, distraction and deep focus, disengagement and high performance, yet too often it is left out of workplace discussions. Businesses that recognize this, act on it, and create environments where nutrition supports and not hinders performance will see the benefits firsthand. And with all of that, I am going to hand over to Tahani to explore how businesses can take meaningful steps to support women's health at work, going beyond awareness to implement practical, high-impact strategies.
Thank you so much, Mel. That was so interesting. And it's really interesting to look at how nutrition and hormones and workplace genuinely do intersect. Now, for me, I want to bring this back to all of you as employers and as individuals, and think about what we can do to kind of help shape this. Before I do that. I mean, we've talked a lot through Melanie's presentation about how women's health affects individuals, but it's also really important at an economic level. So excuse me for reading out some stats to you, but menopause costs the UK economy 14 million working days per year. That's an immense amount due to absences related to symptoms. 1 in 10 women have left a job due to menopause symptoms. 14% have reduced their working hours, and another 14% have gone part-time. Despite all of this, less than a quarter of employers report that female employees report that their employer has menopause policies or support measures in place. And so there's a real gap here that we need to address. Now, all of that being said, and it sounds quite negative, awareness of menopause and women's health at work has been growing, but a lot of businesses are still figuring out how to translate this into something meaningful and into real action. And it's not always about a lack of willingness. Often it comes down to a few key gaps. First of all, many workplaces don't yet have structured policies in place, and that could be anything from flexible working through to kind of menopause advice and support or access to wider wellbeing resources. Secondly, menopause and women's health needs need to be part of the leadership conversation. When businesses make these topics visible, employees feel much more empowered to access the support that they need. And then finally, and really, really importantly, there's workplace culture and stigma. Many women don't yet feel comfortable speaking openly about their experiences, but this is starting to change. And companies that foster an open and inclusive culture will attract and retain talent more effectively. And for me, this is a really, really important point. There is no one-size-fits-all model or solution that employers can put in, and women's health is not one-size-fits-all. But the most successful businesses are evolving their approach to ensure that midlife women's needs are met, and met very specifically. So the good news is that these barriers that we're talking about aren't permanent, and businesses that take action now will build healthier and higher performing teams. So let's explore what we can look at in terms of real action and how to drive that forward. So as we've just said, there's a growing acknowledgement of women's health needs in the workplace, but real change happens when we move from awareness to action. Number one, workplaces should offer flexibility for those managing symptoms, including things like remote working or adjusted schedules. And number two, and here's where we come in again, nutrition is a really critical missing piece. So providing meal options that are really balanced can help manage energy, mood, and cognition, and providing information to help people make those better choices is also really important. And all of this can help women thrive throughout their careers. But in particular, at the point where they're reaching perimenopause, menopause, where they spent decades building experience and skill, knowing the organization, they are really approaching or starting to approach the peak of their careers. And that's the point at which you don't want to lose these women. And so to help you retain experienced and high-performing employees at a time when their skills and leadership are the most valuable, you need to think about this now and really help your kind of workplace retention. So I guess the question is, from your side, do these changes actually make a difference? And the data says that they do. So according to the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development, they published a report in 2023 that said that 84% of women without workplace support say that menopause symptoms negatively impact their work, compared to 71% who receive support. And then those who feel supported report higher confidence, better productivity, as well as stronger career progression. Despite all of this, only 1/3 of employees feel that their employer actively supports them at work. And so I would say that the confidence reported by those who receive support really shows that even small policy changes can have a measurable impact on productivity, on retention, and on employee well-being. And we're not the only ones who think so. So lots of forward-thinking organizations, several of which, who we work with, already recognizing the benefits of integrating nutrition into workplace wellbeing strategies. So for example, Caroline here, who's the global head of wellbeing at Simmons & Simmons, in her quote says, "The right fuel sharpens focus, enhances endurance, and arguably ultimately determines success." And that's so important. I think this really emphasizes the need for proactive solutions that meet employees where they are and acknowledges that food and nutrition play a really key role in supporting resilience and long-term health. And then here we have Rebecca from the Cheshire Merseyside Perinatal Service. And we worked with this organisation to tailor some nutritional interventions and education for staff that focused on improving individual well-being as well as service user well-being. And this drove some real outcomes in their place, addressing things like cognitive function, recovery, and performance. So I'd say the results are pretty clear, that even small changes in workplace wellbeing strategies can really create meaningful impact. So now's the time I would ask you to reflect and think about what specifically you can do. from my point, the first thing you can do is think about your workplace policies and think about how well you're supporting hormonal health at work. And then secondly, once you've done that, think about one key gap. You can't do everything at once, but what is one thing that you could do better, whether that's your food offering, things like vending machines or cafes or snacks in the kitchen, through to flexibility or kind of education and signposting around better nutrition. And wherever you are on your journey supporting women's health, there's always more that you can do. And if you want help, talk to us. That's what we're here for. We'd really love to work with you. We provide all different kinds of support, which can range anything from providing expert consultations through to developing tailored nutrition strategies, or just simply involving you in a network of people and organizations that prioritize employee well-being in this way. But at the core, what we think about and what you need to think about is implementing practical, evidence-based and cost-effective strategies. And so this is my time for a very short plug, which is, what we do at Think Through Nutrition. We offer a multitude of ways to support teams, whether it's workshops, long-term wellbeing programs, using either in-person tools or digital tools like our Lana digital education program, which helps users to monitor their health, their well-being, their food consumption, and their performance in general. And we work with a lot of organizations to kind of track the outcomes that they want to measure in terms of efficacy and individual outcomes for their employees to improve health. So long programs like that, short, sharp, and workshops, fun kind of brain health and brain boosting days, whatever model you go for, we provide science-backed and very actionable solutions that can support employee health. But anyway, as for you, I would say the next step is just really simple. Choose one action to improve women's health support in your workplace today, whether that's a policy review, a conversation with HR, or a commitment to improving workplace nutrition. And come to us if there's any support you need. We're very happy to signpost or to help directly. But I hope we can continue this conversation. Now, on that note, I'm going to welcome Melanie back in and invite Alexander Crickmay, who's our partnerships manager, to jump in with the questions he's been monitoring for us on the chat. Hi, Alex. Hi, Mel.
Hello. First of all, thank you to both of you. That was absolutely amazing. I certainly learned a lot, and I think probably there's a lot more that I could learn too. So I could, certainly have a lot more of these sessions. So thank you
that's
so
a really good point, Alex, actually. And one thing I should say is, we've put this into an hour, but there is so much content here. It was very difficult for us actually to reduce this down because it's a full day of talking about this that we could probably do.
And on that note, just to all our attendees, also thank you for attending today. We'll be sending out a version of this presentation in the next few days. Obviously, there's a lot of information. We'll be sure to share that with you. And on that note, so my role at Think Through Nutrition is to work with our corporate partners. And, as we've highlighted today, this is a core part of what we do is work with organizations, especially around nutrition, about how they can optimize their workforce in terms of productivity and also just general mood, well-being, reducing absenteeism, all the things that we've covered today. And it's great. We've seen some really nice questions come in on that note. So I will start with the first one, which is from Catherine, who's actually asked two really interesting questions. So I'll put them to both of you, Mel and Tahani. The first one is, what do you think great looks like when organizations are talking about these topics? What is the ideal way we can talk about this?
Well, I'll take the first part of that question in that case. And I think great is really everything we've talked about today. I think obviously different organizations are at different stages in the journey. So I think coming out of today, what would make you great is taking a step forward in whatever way that is. But if we're talking about kind of shining examples, do the full suite of things. Number one, start with your leadership. Make this a conversation that you can have and that the organization can have. I can't stress enough how important it is to kind of just open up the conversation. And then secondly, just thinking about your full suite of what you offer as an organization. So even if you don't offer food directly on site, what are your local kind of food suppliers? What's the cafe that everybody pops to around the corner during their break? Maybe look at building partnerships with organizations like that. Better signposting so that people can have benefits on things that actually promote and support their health. So that's just one thing that we haven't covered in the presentation. But please do everything we've talked about there, and there's much more that we can guide you on as well beyond that.
And then the second one, on a different note, is, would you recommend for women to take adaptogens like lion's mane and ashwagandha for these symptoms?
Adaptogens. So I can't give specific supplement advice, as it does depend on, the quality of the supplement, the individual, and also what I would say with things like ashwagandha, potential interactions that may occur with medications. What I would say is the supplement industry is a billion-dollar business, and there's a huge increase right now in what we would call menowashing, where products are aggressively marketed to women in midlife without strong evidence to back up their claims. And obviously, when you're desperate, you kind of fall for them. And actually, in fact, the global market, I think, for menopause, and I will have to check this, products is worth about 16.9 billion, with the majority of that spent on dietary supplements. I mean, in terms of the evidence, lion's mane is being studied for cognitive function, protection, and ashwagandha. There is a little bit more evidence on ashwagandha for kind of stress resilience, sleep support. There's been a few randomized controlled trials to show that it reduces stress and may help with anxiety and sleep. So yes, adaptions, they may benefit, but you need to, before you even look at supplements, get the fundamental pillars right, which is nutrition, sleep, stress management, hydration, and things like relaxation, social connection. Those are more important before you go into any supplement.
Very good. Another question we've had in on a slightly different note as well is what lessons can we take from this conversation to create healthier, higher performing teams across all workplaces, not just for women?
Oh, that's a really great question. Well, I mean, I would say everything we've discussed today. Sorry, Mel, do you mind if I jump in and take this one to start with? But yeah, everything we've discussed today. So energy levels, mental clarity, stress resilience, they apply to everyone, not just women. So nutrition is just generally one of the most overlooked factors in workplace performance and well-being. And so for any organization that's looking to build a higher performing workforce, I'd say the key is, number one, create an environment that supports cognitive function and energy stability. Number two, optimize your food offerings so that people aren't relying on just caffeine and sugar to get through the day. And number three, educate your teams. It's not just about you knowing, they have to know how to make the right choices and understand the link between food and mood. So any small practical interventions like understanding that link or the link between focus, productivity and food can drive really huge long-term benefits. We work with businesses to embed nutrition into the workplace wellbeing strategies. And so any advice you need on that, just come to us and we're very kind of happy to signpost you as much as possible.
Wonderful, thank you. And perhaps one for Mel here. For women struggling with brain fog or mood fluctuations at work, what is the one dietary change you would recommend they make?
I think, well, when we talk about diet, we should eat not nutrients in isolation. So I'm just going to start with saying that we should eat it as kind of a everything. But if I had to pick one, it would probably be omega-3s. I've said DHA supports brain function, EPA helps inflammation and mood. So if we're particularly looking for, women's health throughout all stages. So as I said in the presentation, kind of oily fish, salmon, sardines, mackerel, flax seeds. Yeah, that would be my one.
And it's a question from me here actually, but is supplements of fish oil versus the real thing, is there a difference, would you say?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say there's a real, like, in terms of difference. Obviously, when food is eaten as part of kind of the matrix, where there's things like better absorption and eating food. I think what I would say with supplementation, if people do struggle to get those foods in, it's something to consider. And people don't like oily fish, or people are plant-based, so you may want to look for a supplement then. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. The next question is about gut health. So you hear a lot about gut microbiome in the media these days. What role does gut health play in regulating hormones? Can it help? And what should I do?
Yeah, I think we're finding a lot about gut health at the moment, but it plays a direct and indirect role, really. So it can influence, so I brought up the estrobolome. So that influences the way that estrogen is metabolized and excreted. It can influence inflammation and nutrient absorption. But beyond kind of estrogen, gut inflammation, so an imbalanced gut microbiome can also disrupt other hormones. So if you have an imbalanced gut microbiome, it can lead to things like, I don't like this phrase, but leaky gut, so increased intestinal permeability, which can then further create stress on the body. If you create stress on the body, the body's always, the hormone cortisol is our stress hormone. The body's always going to prioritize that hormone. And so that can then disrupt your sex hormones. Yeah, whole host of direct and indirect kind of factors, I would say.
Amazing, thank you. And we've had one more come in, so perhaps this is the final one, but again, we have a couple of minutes if anyone else has any they'd like to share. What would you recommend for a replacement for vegan diet? So if someone is vegan and they're looking for a source of an alternative source for fish oils, I suppose, omega-3.
Okay, so I mean, there's flax seeds, walnuts, chia seeds. You know, they differ slightly. Is that the challenge with a vegan diet is that the primary source of DHA and EPA do come from oily fish. So most plant-based omega-3 sources provide ALA, which is a precursor to the DHA and EPA. Sorry, it's getting a bit sciencey. But the conversion of ALA to DHA and EPA are slightly lower. So it means like relying on solely ALA can maybe not be sufficient. So then you would maybe look at something alternatively. So algae-based supplements, alga oil, as well as getting like flax seeds, walnuts, and things like that as well. So that's when you may, and I can't advise on supplement, look at alternatives potentially.
Okay, so there are some out there if you're vegan. That's good to know. Okay, well, I think that's it from the attendees. Do we have any closing remarks from Tahani and Matt?
Yes, well, I mean, mainly just to thank you all for kind of joining us today and giving us reason to kind of talk about this really important topic as well. It's definitely something we're going to be doing a deeper dive into as an organization, and as well as kind of expanding on this lecture series. So just our first in the Better Brains, Better Business lecture series. We'll be having more events later this year. So I hope you'll be able to join us for those. And in the meantime, if you aren't brave enough to ask any questions or something occurs to you afterwards, I've just reshared my screen, got both my email address and Melanie's there. So please reach out to us if you've got any questions. I should have included yours as well, Alexander, but it will be alexander@thinkthroughnutrition.org. And so please feel free to reach out to any of us. And thanks again for joining us today. Take care for now. Bye, everyone.